Bodybuilding is an incredible sport that shows us the incredible capacity of the human muscle, including endurance, strength, and recovery. While many of these gains you can make naturally, many people opt for anabolic steroids. Today, we're going to continue talking about anabolic steroids by learning about Deca, or Nandrolone Decanoate. So what is Deca? Well, Deca is chemically known as Nandrolone Decanoate. Well, what is that? This is an ester of nandrolone. Well, nandrolone is a steroid. Same structure here. And what we're doing is we're adding this piece. So we're making it an ester of nandrolone. An ester is a description of a certain kind of structure in chemistry. So this is a descendant almost of nandrolone. Now, nandrolone alone will not be the topic of today's discussion, but it is an anabolic steroid along with its ester. And we know an anabolic steroid is a hormone that helps build muscle. It helps build up body tissues. That originally comes from cholesterol. In this case, an androgenic anabolic steroid is a synthetic offshoot of something like testosterone. These structures are very, very similar, and they are all a little different. What's interesting about Nandrolone Decanoate compared to other steroids, these are the ones that I've looked into and are looking into, there is a legitimate medical use. Now, it looks like Deca and testosterone seem to be commonly used medically, especially testosterone. So Deca is only used in certain circumstances and sometimes in certain places. So chronic kidney disease, postmenopausal osteoporosis, HIV/AIDS associated wasting syndrome, specifically AIDS associated wasting syndrome. We got a picture right here, this guy. We'll talk about the medical uses later on in the video. It can be used for breast cancer and aplastic anemia, among other things. Although the medical uses are cool, today we're talking about steroids, in this case the non-medical use. So Deca can be used for things like strength and endurance. Although it does offer lean muscle mass growth, it is not potent compared to other steroids like Tren or even Anadrol or something like that. It is anti-inflammatory. Many people report great feeling joints. It does offer a lot of muscle recovery. And a lot of this is important for heavy lifting and recovery, which is a must when it comes to really trying to max out your muscle gains and keep a good pump when you're working out. Deca is also unique because it has a relatively higher safety profile compared to other anabolic steroids. Now, this is in the context of medical use. Deca is used in certain specific amounts for certain conditions. When you're talking about bodybuilding and you're getting up to these high dosages, that safety profile can become less significant. From the research I did, at least with competitive bodybuilding, it seems like Deca is used during the off season. Just like my last video, there are so many specifics when it comes to steroid use. Everyone has a different stack. Certain steroids work better than others. Today, I'm presenting to you information that I found from my research. Some of it may apply, some of it may not apply. But I just wanted to give you guys a general overview into this specific steroid. So when it comes to anabolic steroids, cycles are important to understand. Just a reminder from my last video, a cycle, steroid cycle, is multiple doses of a steroid or steroids in a specific time period with breaks in between. These breaks are important for things like hormone system recovery, which these steroids can really do damage to your hormone homeostasis. They're also important for body recovery. What you gain in results, there are some losses, potential losses, when it comes to possible damage and side effects. Deca is used for bulking, but oftentimes with a stack. It doesn't seem like it's commonly used by itself. Now, it could be used by itself for maintenance, for a little extra pump, a little extra muscle. But when it comes to really bulking on that muscle and gaining muscle, it's stacked from simple stacks to very complex, which we'll talk about. This is because it has moderate lean muscle mass production. You'll still get bigger, but if you're really looking to get big, you're gonna stack it with a bunch of different things. And a stack is adding on one or more steroids or other things to increase and maximize the results that you want. It's very cooperative with other steroids, but just like anything we take, dosage is important. The companion molecule, the other steroid you're taking it with. And it seems like these cycles run a little longer because Deca is a slow-acting steroid. It takes some time for it to really build up on your system. So you're going to see a longer cycle compared to other steroids. From what I saw, 12 to 16 weeks. And I'm saying all this to say that there's a lot of versatility with this steroid. Do you want to gain strength or bulk? Well, there's a certain amount you might want to try. Do you want to do a long term, a smaller amount? Well, there's certain dosages. Are you trying to use it for cutting? It can be used for so many things. A lot of these numbers I'm going to be using are based off of a bunch of websites. Some may seem accurate, some may not seem accurate. The issue with making videos on anabolic steroids is that everyone's different. So this will be very general when it comes to these dosages, but I try my best to find some kind of numbers that work. One thing you'll see is this arimidex. Aromatase inhibitors are important when it comes to something like Deca, and we'll talk about what that is a little later. Let's talk about these cycles and these stacks. We're going to go from beginner to intermediate to advanced. So beginner. Seems like Deca and Testo is a pretty good beginner cycle. Now you have options for testosterone enanthate or cypionate. They're pretty much the same thing. Enanthate has a shorter half-life. Cypionate is a little longer. Some people say they do slightly different things when it comes to side effects. I saw research that showed that evidence is hit or miss. You'll see some people that prefer enanthate, some people prefer cypionate. I think some of it also depends on how available it is in your area. But I just wanted to mention those two versions of testosterone. But as far as what they do, it's pretty much the same. Let's talk about this cycle. So 300 milligrams of Deca, week 1 to 10. This is a 12 to 14 week cycle. This is very mild. It's got some good fat loss because of testosterone. You can gain some good weight. It's cardiovascular friendly, gynecomastia friendly. Gynecomastia is a medical term for just man boobs. But because of the testo, it's not as friendly to your hair. And just like pretty much any steroid, post-psychotherapy is a must. We got 500 milligrams of testosterone week 1 to 12. And these amounts are weekly. And as you can see, we're stopping that Deca 2 weeks before the cycle ends to give it time to leave your system. Because I mentioned before, it's a slow-acting steroid. And we need those 2 weeks because we need to know when we're going to start that post-cycle therapy. So let's go to intermediate. So this example I saw was Deca plus dianabol or D-bol and testosterone. This is a 12-week cycle. You're going to start with 400 milligrams of Deca alone, week 1 to 2. Then 400 milligrams of Deca, week 3 to 4, plus 10 milligrams a day of D-bol, plus 500 milligrams of testosterone weekly. Again, these numbers are a rough guess, an amalgamation of the sites I saw. You might do less or more. Then we have 400 milligrams of Deca, week 5 to 10, plus an increase in D-bol, 20 milligrams a day, and 500 milligrams of testosterone. That amount stays consistent throughout the whole cycle. Or you could do 400 milligrams of Deca, week 1 to 10, plus 30 milligrams of D-bol for the first 6 weeks, and 500 milligrams of testosterone every 12 weeks. What you'll see is as I go through these cycles, there are all kinds of little things you can change up depending on the person and what you want. So D-bol, while you do have the gains, you're going to also deal with those side effects. So you have the gains of muscle hypertrophy, growing those muscles, but high blood pressure, liver issues. The Deca stack does seem to reduce those adverse effects. You can expect to gain a lot of weight, but there's water retention and bloating. Gynecomastia can be an issue, but it is less androgenic, at least in comparison, from the research I saw. These androgenic side effects, these more sexual side effects, hormonal side effects, seem to depend on the person, but specifically the dose and what you're doing. But this stack, from what I saw, can be a little less androgenic than most. So now let's get into more advanced cycling. You have 400 to 600 milligrams of Deca week 1 to 14. It's a 16-week cycle. 500 milligrams of testosterone weekly. 50 milligrams of D-ball the first 6 weeks, plus human growth hormone, HGH, for all 16 weeks. So what we're doing, we're adding the Deca, adding more Deca, adding more D-ball, and we're adding HGH. So some of these factors are going to stay the same. This is similar to the intermediate, but expect that testosterone to really crash. And again, you're stacking more, so you might have to deal with the side effects of HGH, D-ball, testo, and Deca. Post-cycle therapy is a must for this cycle. So let's get into an advanced cut. So this is a 16-week cycle. Week 1 to 8, 250 milligrams of testosterone enanthate every other day, 200 milligrams of Deca every week, 4 IUs of HGH daily, 1 milligram of Arimidex every other day. Then week 9 to 12, we have 200 milligrams of testosterone propionate every other day, 80 milligrams of Anavar every day, 100 milligrams of Tren every other day, 200 milligrams of Deca every week, 4 IUs of HGH, and 1 milligram of Arimidex every other day. Then we're going to cut the Deca, do 100 milligrams of testosterone propionate. We're cutting that by half. 100 milligrams of Tren, 4 IUs of HGH, and 1 milligram of Arimidex. Then as we close out week 15 to 16, Tren 200 milligrams, 4 IUs of HGH, 1 milligram of Arimidex, and 100 milligrams of testosterone propionate. Just another version of testosterone. So this is interesting. I wanted to put it in here because to me, there's like a lot going on here. There's so many different variables, and I know that nowadays stacking is getting more and more advanced, and I thought this is a very good example. Some of you who do anabolic steroids might have seen more intense stacks or might be doing something like this. So let's talk about women. So Deca is a steroid women can use. I keep seeing that Anavar is the best one, but in this case, 50 milligrams of Deca week 1 to 8. I'm assuming it's a 10-week cycle. The thing about Deca is that there's a virilization risk, which means producing male sex characteristics, a deeper voice, some acne, things you don't really want, and it is slow acting. So it's not like this can just leave your system quickly. Anadrol is preferred from what I saw. It's fast acting and seems to work well. And then one more stack, Deca and Anadrol. This is a 12-week cycle, 400 milligrams of Deca, week 1 to 10, plus 10 milligrams a day, week 3 to 4. Same amount of Deca, and then week 5 to 12, we're increasing it by 20 milligrams a day of Anadrol. From what I saw, this is less impotence meaning those negative sexual side effects that have to do with reproduction, things like that. Some better penile blood flow. Deca is interesting in that I don't want to say a common effect, but a side effect can be erectile dysfunction and other things that we'll discuss later. The issue is that here there can be cardiac side effects, liver side effects. It is fairly androgenic, and this stack, and I think a lot of others involving Deca, does pose a risk of testicular atrophy. So we have normal testicles here, atrophy meaning a weathering, a breaking down, smaller. So we have here smaller, the function drops. This is something you do not want. So when it comes to Deca, the sexual side effects can draw people away from it. Some people say they take it, they have no sexual side effects, but it is known for sexual side effects. So how does this work? Well, androgenic anabolic steroids all have a very similar function. They're going to bind to this androgen receptor, increase these growth factors, allow for more red blood cell production and nutrient availability, increase the skeletal muscle growth and protein growth, and overall really pump up those muscles and make them look nice and big. What's interesting is that Deca is great for joint pain. I went through Reddit a lot and I saw that a lot of people, even if they didn't really find that Deca really pumped them up, a consistent thread was that people really felt like their joints were much better. They felt really good. They could get a heavy squatting, heavy lifting. This does promote collagen synthesis and bone mineralization. So it is slow acting, as I mentioned before. What it does do, like a lot of steroids, is that it increases nitrogen retention. So when we consume food, live our daily lives, we do have nitrogen that we put in our body. But that nitrogen also is excreted. What you want is an increase in total body protein. So you want more nitrogen going in than nitrogen coming out. This will, on top of a lot of other complexities, increase muscle mass, on top of how this steroid generally affects the muscles due to its anabolic, its building up effects. And that nitrogen retention is very, very important for someone that's looking to really get those gains. You want to make sure your nitrogen stays in so your muscle mass can increase. So as I mentioned in my last video, androgenic and anabolic are these two arenas when it comes to steroids. What's interesting is that Deca is not known to have heavy androgenic side effects. At least in a clinical setting, at least generally, there's minimal androgenic side effects. You have more anabolic side effects than androgenic, but again, that anabolic effect is not high compared to other steroids. Your testosterone does spike, which is bad in the long run because your levels will drop. Cortisol, the hormone that's released via stress, is reduced. So there are some pretty nice benefits. As far as the anabolic qualities, you do have increased protein synthesis, nitrogen retention that I mentioned before. You have an increased muscle mass, as I mentioned, less potent, but that recovery, the performance, the work it does on the joints, it seems to be very popular for those reasons. As far as the androgenic side effects in men, there's skin disorders, conditions, acne, erectile dysfunction that I did mention before, testicular atrophy that I mentioned, gynecomastia. A lot of these differ depending on the person. Some people experience it, some people don't experience it. And it also depends on the stack. Again, when you're stacking on top of this thing, you can expect more side effects. And for women, the big risk for a lot of these steroids of women is virilization. Developing those male sex characteristics, a deeper voice, acne, all sorts of other things. And as I mentioned before, this does result in fluid retention. So there can be some bloating and some swelling of the muscle that will or can reduce once you finish the cycle. Let's talk about post-cycle therapy. As I do more and more research on these steroids, post-cycle therapy is a video alone. I'll make a video on post-cycle therapy because it differs so much, and this depends on what you're doing. During the cycle, there's a lot going on. The hormone system is a very fine-tuned machine, and when you mess with it, your hormones can be dramatically altered and suppressed. What you want after a cycle is a decrease in estrogen, which is where that Arimidex comes from, an increased testosterone. Your body testosterone will drop dramatically, and so you need that testosterone to come back up. You want to maintain those muscle gains. When there's a steroid that does include fluid retention, those gains will be lost a little bit, but you want to maintain as much as possible. And you want to reduce those negative side effects, specifically the severe ones. And you need to wait until the steroid is gone from the body to start the cycle. In Deca, as I mentioned, here it says 3 weeks. I've seen 2 pretty consistently, but you do want to stop it at least a couple weeks before the cycle ends so it can get out of your system and you can start that therapy. I mentioned clomiphene before. This is one of the many molecules. It's good for fertility, testosterone production. The numbers I've seen are 3 weeks, 50 milligrams daily. The PCT length can vary depending on what you're doing. I'm assuming if you do a heavier stack, you're going to want to add all kinds of complexities to that PCT. Then we have Arimidex or anastrozole. I'm assuming it's pronounced. Now this can be used during the cycle. So it's technically not post-cycle therapy, but it can be included in the therapy that is used while you're on the cycle to really help you prepare to get off the cycle. This is an interesting drug in that it can be used for breast cancer. It is an aromatase inhibitor. Aromatase makes estrogen from steroid hormones. And what you don't want is estrogen. That's how you get things like gynecomastia and all sorts of other side effects that you do not want to deal with. Because again, the goal is to maximize gains, maintain those gains, and reduce the side effects and help balance out your hormone system as best as possible. So Deca does have some adverse effects. This is a really nice chart I got from a research paper that I read. There's a meta-analysis done. This is from that meta-analysis. 42% endocrine side effects, hormonal, 14% cardiovascular side effects, 12% skin side effects, 9% psychiatric. In a meta-analysis, it is a gigantic study on other research papers to kind of see, okay, what did they find and how can we group up all this information to reach a conclusion? So with men, erectile dysfunction, I mentioned, gynecomastia, liver and kidney damage is possible. High blood pressure is possible. All this depends on the person, what you're taking Deca with. There's all kinds of things, but these are possibilities. Mood disorders and aggressiveness. And I mentioned women, virilization is an issue. Acne, deeper voice, hirsutism is growing hair where hair doesn't normally grow, at least in a great amount. And when I consulted Reddit, I saw that a lot of people experience some of the same things. Paranoia, jealousy, mood swings, depression, aggressiveness, sexual side effects, problems with ejaculation. These seem to be more common than the more intense organ disease side effects, so I just wanted to mention them. But if you want to pause, this picture here kind of gives you an idea of the side effects. From the clinical standpoint, this steroid does not have heavy adverse effects, but when you increase those doses, you might expect some. Last but not least, the medical uses. This can be used for anemia of chronic kidney disease, osteoporosis for postmenopausal women. So again, this steroid is useful for not only muscle growth, but bone density. And an increase in those red blood cells which would help anemia. In Australia, it can be used for kidney disease, aplastic anemia, a dysfunction in bone marrow, inoperable breast cancer. In New Zealand, can be used for nitrogen imbalance. This is also used for HIV/AIDS associated wasting syndrome, this picture I showed earlier, a complex syndrome which results in decreased muscle mass and tone and strength. So this makes sense. In this case, if it's appropriate, you want something that someone can take to really increase that body weight, increase that structure that was lost due to something like AIDS or another condition. So let's go through the summary and review what we learned. So we mentioned Nandrolone Decanoate was an ester of nandrolone and has its medical uses and its non-medical uses, which in bulk was the majority of this video. Deca can be used in all sorts of different cycles and all sorts of different stacks. It's versatile. It can be used in all sorts of different situations. And a beginner stack can be Deca and testosterone. Relatively mild, not too intense. It can offer some pretty good results. And Deca is often stopped a couple weeks before the cycle ends to prep for post-cycle therapy. Then we got into the intermediate and advanced stacks. You're adding a lot more compounds in a more complex schedule. We talked about how these really can help you gain those big muscles, those big gains, get that strength that you want, but there are risks for more intense side effects. And for any case, post-cycle therapy is a must for recovery. Then we did a more advanced cut with a bunch of different molecules, some steroids, some not. All for the goal of really, in this case with advanced cutting, really cutting down that fat, but in general, really building up those muscles and getting to the body that you want. We talked about Deca being used for women and a smaller Deca and Anadrol stack. For the most part, Deca works like any androgenic anabolic steroid. It is very good for nitrogen retention, which is what you want for that increased muscle mass. Noteworthy though, it does help with joint pain and joints in general, which a lot of people really praise it for, even if they don't get the growth that they want. Compared to most steroids, it has a lot less of an androgenic effect on the body and more of an anabolic, although it is less potent than other anabolic steroids. there are still side effects in men and women, and this is a steroid that really results in fluid retention. We discussed post-cycle therapy being a must with any cycle, but especially the Deca cycles, and especially the more complicated stacks. Clomiphene being a very commonly used drug, but we also have Arimidex, which is used often during the cycle as an aromatase inhibitor to keep that estrogen down. We then got into the adverse effects, of which there are many. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of them. Again, this is all situational. In men, you can expect a decent amount of side effects. Some are more rare than others. And as I mentioned, I consulted Reddit and saw that jealousy, paranoia, aggressiveness, all these things seem to be experienced compared to the other more heavy organ-related side effects. We then closed out with the medical uses for Deca: anemia, osteoporosis, wasting syndrome. Overall, this is a very interesting and versatile drug used for bodybuilding or medical conditions. I had a fun time doing research on it. I hope you guys have learned a lot. And as always, thank you so much for watching and listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Tell your friends, and I'll be back soon with another video.